So we'll start pretty broad. We talked last time about some of the practices for like creating energy and like room in the body. I feel like a lot of that is like you could, let's say, people call it like personal development or like spiritual journey. Like for you, like what are you working on, or like what is the road that you're going down, and why is it something that's important to you?
That's a fantastic question. I'll first preface this question because to me, what I'm working on is a continual evolution or progression of what I was previously working on. I do have, let's say, like one focus, like I threw one dart in the distance, and that's where my initial trajectory is. But I'm also aware that on my path, the first step I take, that's the only path that matters to me the most, that's illuminated, because that's where all the information I need is right there for me in order to see the next stepping stone and then progress to that next stepping stone. So for me currently, I'll base it like this. I threw a dart that I want to get closer to God, and I want to learn more about my body so that I can be better at being myself. The better I'm being like at me I am, the easier it is for me to enjoy life and everything life has to offer in all its degrees. There's not something that's more important or less important. Every single thing life has to offer, I get to enjoy it to the same degree. To me, that is one of the most fulfilling feelings I've felt, and I want to keep feeling it so much more often. And currently, that step is love. How do I love and how do I feel what I feel? Because I started to notice that everything that is inside of me or that I notice inside of others, whether it's back and forth, whether it's like a positive interaction or negative interaction, all of those in quotes, I notice that if there's any hiccup in my process, like I'm doing my thing, I'm noticing that I'm having feels, and if any point there's like a little jump or a little shock or a little, tightening up or a little too excited, and I might be a little too frizzy, and suddenly I like bump my toe on something. Any one of those roadblocks is letting me know that there's something more for me to learn in that moment, so I can either love it more, appreciate it more, forgive it. It doesn't matter what it is. That now lets me be more present with that thing, and all of it for that greater sense of fulfillment. So my practice, I've had two big practices currently. So first one, whenever I'm in a conversation with somebody and something comes up that makes me either go back into my head or makes me feel like there's something wrong in the conversation, or I judge it, or I think there's something that needs to be fixed or healed, I immediately recognize, okay, that is something in my heart that I don't recognize as being okay in the moment. So I pause and I imagine myself expanding this like flame of love inside of me. It says, I almost imagine like I'm holding a torch, right? But it's in here. So I'm holding a torch, and that's my level of love. And I just imagine myself like kindling that torch and stoking that fire a little bit more so I can see more around me. And the more I see around me, I just imagine it letting it do its own thing. It doesn't matter what it's doing. I just let it do its own thing. And then suddenly all the area around me starts to clear around. And that lets me feel either the things immediately go into the light of God and it's gone forever, or it moves through me and I end up feeling more fear because it's just so many deep things inside of me that I never knew what to feel with or anything. And I just learned to let myself feel those things, not judge them, not think anything about them. The more I let myself let those feelings exist, they just start to automatically leave on their own. So I immediately feel a much greater sense of peace in the space. So that's practice number one that I feel has been the most illuminating in my path of love. The second greatest practice I've had, oh man, and this one's the one that's like the tricky one because this one shows up like very much in the moment. So whenever I have an interaction with anybody, and this is when I get back into my head, right? Because I grew up in a very critical thinking lifestyle. I made sure that everything I understood in the world, that I was the one getting the answers. I was the one making sure that I understood the concept and everything in here. Like I was very big on neuroplasticity, making sure my brain was at its peak constantly and that I could mold it and generate every single answer I needed, which absolutely that gave me so many answers and so many tools on how to like work on my hand eye coordination or how to develop any other skill I wanted. Absolutely. But I was neglecting a lot of what I felt and a lot of what my heart had to offer for the situation. It took me years to realize before I noticed that there was either some pain and I was only describing the pain from a sense of thought instead of from a sense of feeling. So I couldn't actually approach my healing journey in any way from any grounded way whatsoever. So when I learned to feel what I feel, I'll give an example of something I had recently. I was talking to a family member, and they were telling me about one of their own healing journeys, something that they've been working on for so long and finally managed to make headway on their own healing journey. I noticed the second that they mentioned that they healed themselves and they worked through this process and they feel better at the other side, I noticed that a part of me suddenly felt like, wow, I wasn't there for them. I couldn't help them. I didn't heal them. Like I felt a part of me was a little bit disappointed at myself that I couldn't help that individual that I loved so much in my life. Right? To me, as a concept, why wouldn't I be happy for them? Why couldn't I just be so happy that they were able to heal and love and just make, like now feel so much more space in their life? But that meant that inside of me, I felt like there was either something wrong inside of them or inside of me that only I had the answer. And I needed that level of, appreciation with myself and with them in order to feel like that moment was now successful or had some level of fulfillment. So in all of that, like I recognized it was like a tiny little piece in my heart. So for me, I recognized I got to feel what I feel. I let myself feel that level of disappointment and insecurity and lack. And I let myself just like let it expand, but not let it take over. I let it do its own thing. Let it paint the canvas in my heart a little bit, see what that felt like, acknowledge it. And all the colors that it painted, all of those little swifts and things just helped me recognize more areas where I could share with that loved one individual or others or myself of, wow, I recognize you were feeling those feelings. And since I wasn't letting myself feel those feelings, I didn't know how to speak to them. I didn't know how to voice a level of wisdom or understanding of whatever process my loved one was going through or what I was going through, because I had compartmentalized and set them aside so far that I had no access for my level of wisdom and all of that. So when I let them all exist, I suddenly started getting clarity as to how can I grow into a greater depth of just the colors that life has to offer and then share what's actually there. Because that's where the magic is. Like when you look at what's coming up in the moment, all the magic gets to finally show up.
Cool. Okay. Lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So let's go rewind before the practices. When you said you were throwing the dartboard, so like, or throwing the dart at the board, that like the main goal of that was like being the most true version of yourself, or like showing up, being present. Is that dartboard that doesn't move? Like that is always the goal. It's just like the concept, or does that shift as well?
Yeah, as an individual, and I'll share this as a marker for potential growth and deficiency as an individual, like just playing the human game on this planet. Right. So here we are on this planet playing this human game, and there's a lot of factors around, right? There's a lot of factors and a lot of dynamics. There's other individuals, there's life, there's food, there's earth, there's energetics, like the solar system. There's so many other dynamics. Me as an individual, the more I live life, the more opportunities I have to expand and see what's around me, right? It's like there are lots of things on this earth that the more I play with it, the more I move forward, I just will not be able to avoid unless I just start closing off my mind and my heart. And then suddenly I start to just live a very small life within myself, which is totally fine. All of these pieces that I'm mentioning are aspects and avenues for you to be able to remember God, to live a more fulfilled life, like I was saying. So for me in my process, when I consider this throwing that dartboard, I notice that there's one aspect and one avenue in there that I can see for my current perspective. If I'm able to reach that little avenue or reach that little dartboard, I'll know I'll either feel better, I'll feel a little healthier, I'll feel a little more fulfilled, I'll be able to laugh more, whatever factor it is, right? So in this specific dart that I threw, it's like I wanted to heal more of my heart so I could feel love to a greater degree. So I threw that dart. I was like, okay, if I focus on all of these practices, and some of them I don't even know what they are yet, but I know that if I start walking in this direction, I will start to find things in my life that have to do with love and how to heal love. I just don't know where they are yet, because all of this is working with me and for me, and I get to learn what that looks like for me. So I threw that initial dart, and when I took the first step, I'm willing to let that dart move its place and trajectory because I now learned something new about myself. So I'm willing to make that dart actually what it means to me now. So I'm constantly able and willing to create an ally for myself that's bigger. Like I got really big shoes to fill for myself, and I'm willing to let those shoes like change shape and size because now I like a different flavor. I like a different color. I like a different size. And that is perfectly okay in every single step of my process.
So it's really more about just like being open with the initial intent of like, hey, this is the area I want to focus on, or the concept, bring more love into my life. But then from then you just kind of let the cards fall where they fall and move as present as you can, like into whatever comes into your experience. So it's again a little bit more about being open to the flow of the universe as opposed to like trying to control every single process that like eventually gets you love.
Exactly. Yep. Because every single interaction I have, once I set my initial like purpose and trajectory, every single interaction I have actually has some tool for me to learn. I just have to be willing to look deeper and deeper each time. And that's where all of these practices, and especially what void space technologies like goes into, about discovering yourself and using tools and learning. Because like all the tools that we have, they're meant to just show you a part of you that you haven't filled in with your own either understanding or your own love or your own process. And the second it highlights it, that makes just a choice point for you. Because to me, healing is always a choice point. You get to this point where you recognize there's something I want to work on. And you get to choose an avenue of like, oh yeah, I want to work on it and go deeper into it so I see what's actually there for me, or I don't heal it and I just keep living my life. And both of those are perfectly adequate. Like they're perfect solutions and choice points. Because in one of those, you learn more about yourself and you get to feel more life, and you might feel really weird things. And that's actually a part of the healing process a lot of the times. And sometimes if you don't know how to make that healing choice and you go back into your path, you're able to recognize that pattern much more effectively the next time. So it doesn't matter which version you choose, because no matter what, they're all leading you towards the same goal. And it's all a greater lesson for you to then be able to teach at the end of the day.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, if we go to that avenues example, like, how do you balance, like right now you're just focused on love, right? And you even brought up that example, you might have multiple things you want to work on. Like if you come to the street and you're like, hey, like I will need to work on like finances, love, I'm also scared, like I don't have great relationships. Like if you have multiple areas, like how do you go about like selecting the one that feels the most important? Do you try to work on multiple things at once, or is it just kind of like pick one concept, move forward, once you feel ready, then switch avenues? Or what is your process for when you have multiple things that are maybe coming up at the same time?
I like to approach it as there is one big process, as like one big avenue, like we said it, or a tunnel in my life, like this big one. And currently, this big one for me is love. Because I recognize that if I work on love, everything, like I was mentioning before, everything in life will feel that much more accessible and much more fulfilled. And then while I'm working on love, there's all of these other avenues that will absolutely get pinged. So it could be finances, it could be relationships, it could be connections, it could be physical practices on myself. And all of those, I'm now approaching them through the lens of, when I work on this piece, when I learn more about how I handle finances, or I'm willing to look at the things I don't want to look at within myself around finances, I'm now able to love myself more around that process, which then means I can make better choices around it, or I won't be as scared, or I won't feel as insecure when I look at it. So then I can actually feel more free here. So I more consider it like when I threw that dart in the beginning, I'm throwing that dart to create the massive tunnel that I want to play in. Whatever's in there afterwards, that to me, I'm looking at how does that connect with love.
So everything reverts back to the big one, even though it may look different. Awesome. And then you mentioned like the VST products, they're there to help you, see things you might not have, etc. So like, how have you integrated them into your journey, or how has that looked in your life? Like, how do you use them personally for expanding love or for highlighting things? And which ones have you been using right now when you're focused on love?
Yeah, I love that question. So for me, the PNR is one of the greater ones, and I think I mentioned this on a previous call. I love holding the PNR in my hand and then just playing with it, and playing with it in my hands or leaving it on my knee. And whenever I play with it, I feel a massive charge in my body of just information being able to come through. Right. So I noticed that whenever I feel that level of charge or that level of excitement, like my cells start to do this, they just start to spin and be happy. Like they just recognize there's a lot more information happening. And a lot of the times in my body, I either misunderstand that process. This is what I'm noticing, that I would either misunderstand that process, or I would feel too excited and then ungrounded, and I'd immediately start to dissociate. Because I noticed it was so pattern that I started developing when I was a kid. And whenever I would start to feel so charged, I would start to either, if I moved from that level of super excitement or super like hyperactivity, I would either hurt something, I'd hurt myself, or I'd break something. And I started developing a pattern within myself of like, wow, if I keep doing something like this, something will get hurt, or I'll get punished, or something will happen. And then I started like automatically making myself smaller and smaller and smaller, so I wouldn't feel or be able to enjoy the space as much. So in me working on love, when playing with the PNR, I immediately start noticing that charge, like my cells start to get so happy and activated. And I don't even need to know exactly what my cells or what my brain is feeling or thinking, or what that level of excitement is. I just recognize that there is a greater level of activity in my body. I'm already happy that I'm feeling more, right? To me, that is one of the biggest successes. I'm feeling more. I recognize it, like massive check marker in my book. So once I feel that, I start to notice, okay, I let it exist. And when I notice that there's a part of me that either thinks about what do I need to do about this? How do I think about this? How do I choose what to like create something moving forward with this? I start to notice that a lot of those thoughts are starting to, while they feel or think that they could be expansive, like I'm being productive with this energy or this feeling, I notice that it's actually starting to zone it in and funnel it into a smaller avenue, and it doesn't have the same amount of room. What I'm learning about love is that this same capacity, that if I can love it and let it exist as it wants to exist, I don't need to control it. It immediately starts to ground that much more easily. So I'm just noticing immediately all the pieces in my brain or in my heart that are trying to tell me, what do I need to do with this feeling that I'm feeling, instead of letting it exist as it wants to. And I just get to learn how to breathe with it. And even if with all these energies, if I just let myself relax around the feeling, a lot of times I don't even need to do anything, because I'm just accessing a greater feeling of information or a greater flow of substance in the world. And from there, anything I want to share in conversations, it just shows up as a stream naturally. I don't need to create an avenue of, well, what exactly does this mean, or what did it happen? Sometimes creating those avenues create a much grounded approach so I can understand it, so I can, make room for healing. But I recognize that the more I just relax and let things happen in my body, the less I actually need to do in order to feel better about myself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then, I mean, again, it's kind of more about tapping into the feeling, which you said at the beginning, but you said when you were younger, like you were more about the neuroplasticity, kind of like type A logic. Like, what was the bridge from getting from like, okay, like, hyper decision making, logic, neuroplasticity to more like feeling, emotion, etc.?
So when I was developing my whole practice when I was a kid through neuroplasticity, and like I would do all kinds of things. Like I would move my mouse and my keyboard to the opposite hands. Like I'd brush my teeth with like opposite. I would do everything possible to make my brain feel uncomfortable, so I could let my brain do develop all of these new neural pathways. I felt fantastic, and I learned how to let that feel comfortable for myself. And all of that span of time, when I grew up, and then people started asking me, Jesus, how do you feel about this? And I would tell them, well, I feel like, and I would only share mental thoughts about what I was feeling, right? I started to recognize, okay, I was confused as to why people weren't understanding my response. So I knew, right, because of the way I developed my practice of letting myself teach myself of all of these things, I was like, okay, time to look at the heart. And currently, like it was for so long, my approach to learning about my heart and my feelings was a very like brain-oriented, methodical approach. Absolutely cool, right? I let myself be very unlearned and unregulated as to how do I even approach feelings. So the very first piece I recognized, whenever a feeling would come up and I didn't know how to feel it, like sadness, let's take sadness for example, because the depression was one of the big ones that for me to work on. I recognized that whenever depression would come up, my brain immediately started creating these little twists and knobs. Like it actually felt like a sadness would come up, and my brain was creating this twist and enveloping the feeling of sadness, trying to make it like understood. And that's the first thing I noticed, that the second I recognized my brain wanted to understand the feeling of sadness, that's not what feelings are about. You're not meant to like understand the depth of how this feeling like works in the world, and how it like elevates, and how it creates the system in your plan in your whole life. No, the feeling is actually meant to just vibrate your space in a certain way, so you can learn to choose a different momentum for yourself. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, because they're all positive, because they're all helping you remember God. So that was the first level for me, recognizing that this is a moment I get to turn off my brain, and not turn it off like it's not helping me. Turn it off as in let other systems in my body take over, because every single moment in spectrum in my body lets me know that there's something greater for me to learn. My heart is one of those big ones. All the neural pathways in my gut tell me so much more information about how I eat food and what my body's actually going through. My tongue tells me a lot about what my gut's going through, right? I get to now let these pieces of my body tell me information in a completely different way.
So then, okay, so when we say like feeling, like what is the difference? Let's say like if somebody's like, yeah, I'm gonna start going to the gym. I have this habit, right? And you wake up in the morning and you feel like you don't want to do it, but your mind is like, I should do it. Like, is that really a feeling, or is that more of like a thought? And feeling is just like the body experience, or can it still be like what the mind is saying? Or are those two separate things?
That's a great question. And that goes, because I fell into that pattern so much in my life too, right? From the overthinking. And that's exactly what it is. It's overthinking. So you start to recognize you have this spark inside of you to want to create something in your life. And I want to clarify, whenever you get that spark, it doesn't matter if that spark comes from your brain or your heart or your stomach or something outside of you. There is a spark in your life that is an initiation for magic. So then you start moving forward. And when you start moving forward, if you're willing to learn the lesson that's for you in that practice, so you could be going to the gym and you could be like, hey, I want to go to the gym and I want to do this. Even if you question and start doubting yourself about going to the gym, right? The fact that you went there and you're willing to learn a lesson that could be about your body from doing a specific workout, or it could be something even different from like having an interaction from someone at the gym, that's what matters the most. right? You had a spark of creation to do something different in your life or to create a momentum or follow a routine. Absolutely. But then be willing to see whatever's for you there in that moment you stepped into. So whenever you go also into overthinking, which then leads to doubt, right? Doubt is one of the biggest processes like that just knocks over your process like flat out. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like doubt is there to help you remember where you can actually make a choice and a different choice in your life. Like this is actually an ally for yourself. It's very easy to go into a feeling of doubt and let it feel like you've suddenly disappointed yourself or you let yourself down or you've made a mistake. But that's not the case, right? It's an opportunity for you to notice, what do I actually want to choose here? Do I want to choose the spark that's in my heart, the one that's in my brain? Do I want to let them work together? For me, that's helped a lot when I learned to let them work together, because when I let my heart and my brain speak to each other, I notice immediately when my heart says something and it feels amazing, but my brain wants to make it mold into something else that's not the actual feeling that it is. That means I get to learn to let my brain expand and let go of constraints of what living life means to me. And suddenly my brain feels so much more relaxed and stress levels start to go way down because I don't feel like I need to do something in my life in order to feel happy or to have the objective that I thought I needed. And now I'm letting my marker change to whatever it was, whatever it needs to be at that moment for me in the greatest value whatsoever.
Doubt is just a signal to kind of reevaluate some of the things that you have going on. And then
Exactly.
again, just make a new path, move forward until that doubt creeps back up.
Mhm. So
Cool.
to me,
Okay.
right, I've noticed that if doubt shows up, I know to go back to the initial thing that I felt, right? Not to follow the doubt. But if I follow the doubt, that's awesome because then I get to notice, all right, I want to go back to listen to this thing. It's literally a train of thought to just to remind me of the initial feeling that I felt.
Cool. So on a little bit of like a change of directions, we're talking kind of about the journey, some of the practices and everything. Something that Jason talks about a lot is like signals and resources, kind of like the ability to take information and use that information to move forward. What is your take on that, and how are some of the ways that you like, keep your bio antenna strong, biofield strong, and just kind of like your overall energetics high?
Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of tools that help your body realize what where you're holding either too much tension or you're too relaxed. So maybe a lot of people can reference this like in a yoga practice or when you're working out. There's, let's call it like, let's really whittle it down to two basic body types, right? There's a body type that might not be as flexible, but is a lot more capable at managing strength like related practices. So you could go like do a curl or you could do like deadlift or whatever. And if you're not as flexible, but you have more capacity for strength, it's very like you have to work on, touching your toes so you can make room to make the deadlift more effective for yourself. Or the opposite could be true on the other end of the spectrum. Someone could be hypermobile and they have to work on like technique to make sure that they're activating the muscle properly and isolating every single part of that muscle to make the workout more effective, right? In any part of the spectrum, whenever you get the level of information of, okay, I want to make a practice happen, cool. To me, that's already like a signal. You're getting a signal as something to create momentum forward in your life for yourself. Awesome. All of these signals, right? If I were to look at a map, all of these signals of what you want to do in the practice and how you want to affect that practice, whether it's work on the flexibility or work on the mobility, doesn't matter. All of these signals to me and all of these antennas look the same. One of these is not greater than the other, right? All of these signals want to help you map out this other spectrum of your life so you could learn how to manage resources in your body that much more effectively. So whenever you move forward and you hit one of these signals that's telling you, it's like, hey, I want to do deadlift and I want to work on technique. Awesome. To me, like I only take it. It's sometimes when I'm new to a practice, it's very easy to let that signal exist as like the biggest thing because it's creating such a big shift in my life. For me, I've learned that if I take that signal, right, the one that feels massive and it's going to be like the massive thing, but I just make it super small and I just manage it like it's like this little pedal in my hand, suddenly everything else in my body, I get to learn how it affects every single inch of me. So if I'm working on flexibility, like I want to touch my toes so I can learn to deadlift more. Wow, okay, I'm now recognizing there's a greater signal here that's telling me I get to learn how to breathe and relax more when I'm stretching. So I'm starting to incorporate so many more avenues of these signals so I can map out more of this spectrum of the world for myself. Does that make sense? All of these signals are there as my allies, but every single time I move forward, I'm practicing to let all of these signals come in because that immediately lets all of the resources in my body and which ones to add to my body, like more protein or water, or if I'm being honest, right, your body will tell you exactly what you need in that moment, right? So you're learning to then pick up the signals your body's sending. So whatever resources you put in there, you can keep your map as wide as possible. Because whenever you keep your map as wide as possible, you're less like you're more unmessable with, right? You're more able to move through life and allow whatever to comes up, show up, because you're allowing your body to tell you and meet everything right where it's at. You're not allowing things to like steamboat you, or you're not trying to steamboat life to create something that you think is the best thing for you. Everything's working with you. You just got to let all of it give you the information when it's there for you.
When you say like your body will tell you what resources you need, like is that like you work on that, it becomes innate, or like how do you listen to it? Like how have you tuned into your own body, and like what has that experience been for? Like just like no, okay, my body wants this, or I'm dehydrated, or it needs this and this and this. Like has that been, have you just always known, or was it a practice that's grown over time, or what has the relationship been with like listening to yourself?
It was a practice. This wasn't until afterwards where I realized my body was always sending me signals, right? The body is so strong, capable, and intelligent. It's amazing how intelligent the body is. But it wasn't until I was about 13 years old when I bought myself I think it was like 500 index cards of like the body's anatomy. And I just, like 13 years old, I just wanted to learn about the body. I'm just flipping through all of these cards, like learning all the names and learning what all the muscle groups look like and everything. And that's when I started recognizing that if I feel something in my back, for example, I was able to hone in on what muscle was it, and I could move it and strengthen it or flex it and be like, wow, now I know exactly what's being, because it's connected to my spine, which is connected to my brain. And I started to recognize that if I felt something, for example, in my back, it didn't necessarily meant I had something wrong with my back. It meant I had something, either the way that my brain was sending a signal, a stress signal to my hormones to activate this, which then tensed my body, which specifically my back needed to overcompensate. So I learned how to untangle and deconstruct the whole process to see where the actual like signal was like the signal was, and then I could put a resource in that space. So it took me a lot of years of honing down and pausing with my body, because there's so many layers in how you can listen to your body. Your body wants to send you this one signal, and then through all of those layers, right, some of those signals could be really loud and really easy to listen to. I'm thirsty, drink something. But the thing is, when you feel that level of thirst, that doesn't mean your body needs to drink something. Your body's telling you, hey, your body's at this state. You then get to choose and work with your body. Well, what's actually there for you? Because if you pause with thirst, sometimes fasting and like no drinking, like that kind of like liquid fast, means you can step into a different level of reset with your gut health. That's fantastic, right? Your body's sending you a signal. Your body's moving into this new space of movement and evolution in your body. Cool. It's very taught to us that when you feel thirst, to just step into quenching that thirst, right? That's why there were so many ads in the 90s to quench your thirst, right? Quenching your thirst is just one avenue of letting fluidity move, but that is not the solution. Your body wants to give you the solution. How you listen to it, that's different for everybody. But like I said, there's layers of how do you get to it, because sometimes there's resentment of working with your body because we were trained to resent like your body's weakness and that you have to feed it in order to make it strong. It's like, no, your body is way more like capable and comfortable than you think. You just got to relax your brain and your heart and your gut to let the actual signals come in. And sometimes the signals for me, they show up as just like a feeling of a certain kind of food. Or sometimes I get a feeling that a certain food has given me before, and I'm like, oh yeah, wait, is that a burger today? I feel like eating a burger, right? So I get to decipher and translate what my body's wanting to tell me. So to me, it's like working on the absolute connection of like, how do I actually talk to my body? Do I talk to it with my mouth like I would to like a pet I have? Or do I write in a journal? Like it's showed up so differently because I've learned to work through the layers, and I just keep knowing that no matter what layer I work through, I just feel that much more at stillness with my body at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just building up the relationship with it to see like what is and isn't, there for you at the time. Because that makes sense. I mean, those ads were a thing. And I mean, in general, it's kind of, the world is very much like quick response. Like something comes up, you're hungry, eat, you're thirsty, drink, you're upset, emote it, just like freak out, whatever. It's a very like on-demand society. So I guess taking that extra just kind of like second to sit with it and be like, okay, like I feel this, but like what is the way to actually handle this the best for myself? So then it brings me to a question that I've heard like you and Jason. It's like discernment, when like that signal comes in, discern kind of like what to do with it next. How have you built that quality of discernment? Because I think that can be hard for somebody who's like trying to make a change, and then it's like, okay, is it the feeling or is it the thought? Is it really what I should do or shouldn't do? It's like, how do you work on the discernment aspect when those things come up?
Mm-hmm. To me, it goes back to translation. So if I recognize there's a feeling in my body, And right, this could be any signal anywhere whatsoever. I'll just start with my body. So if I recognize there's this feeling in my body, like I'm hungry, cool. I get a sensation that there's something like there's time to put food in there, whether it means to put food in there or not, right? That's what I get to discern. To me, translation has been such a key avenue. And then I'll even add within the practice of translation, there's imagination, right? So imagination is one of your greatest tools to find solutions, creativity, to just let the whole world turn into whatever it needs to turn into so you can see what can be different or what's there for you, right? That's you allowing creativity into a space instead of just allowing a standard process to just continue, right? Like a standard routine to just evolve. So you're allowing something new to show up, and that level of creativity immediately allows for like what kind of different colors or how things can be shaded or how can you feel feelings to a different degree. Now, when I say translation, right, within this space of imagination, that means that if I'm feeling something, right, what's helping me the most is I'm actively working on recognizing what words or sensations can I put to this feeling that's there for me right now. So if I'm feeling hunger, I don't need to know immediately what kind of food. The first thing I'm translating is like hunger to me feels like it feels like a little crackling in my stomach, like it's empty, but it's like popping, right? And then I start to feel like, okay, my stomach feels like it's actually starting to squeeze, but it's not squeezing like it's tightness. It's squeezing like it's asking for something, almost like a vacuum. Okay, to me, that's already creating a communication space with my body, right? That's translating, and you're translating as many of the little particles that you see in there. It's like, okay, when I feel thirst in my body, I start to feel like my mouth is dry. That's translation, right? So you're already starting to discern there's different qualities to the feeling that you're feeling. It's not just thirst, right? It's mouth dryness. So it could be just put an ice cube in your mouth, right? You're starting to see that there's so many little different waves in there. And that same thing goes with feelings, right? Whenever you feel sadness and like all of these feelings can be so encompassing. They just take over because they're magnificent to feel. There's so much wisdom in these feelings that come up, right? But learning to discern and translate and let your imagination like into this whole practice of feeling sadness, feeling anger, feeling rage, feeling joy, and feeling the discernment of what quality of sadness. Is it actually a happy sadness? Is it a sad sadness? Is it a hurt sadness? Is it in my heart? Is it like a pain? Is it a stabbing? All of this helps you recognize that there's like the different level of signals and the map you can create for yourself so that whenever you do resource up, whenever you find a practice, you're that much more complete whenever you complete that practice or finish that resource.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what just kind of clicked for me too is kind of like discernment can be also just like putting away the side of like, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? But it's kind of you just feel into it, do it, and then it's like you can also reflect and just the practice of discerning whether right or wrong in quotations. Like maybe that action didn't feel good or it wasn't the one you wanted to do. Then at least next time that feeling comes up, you can try a different action, and then eventually, just through that process, you'll learn to discern better. So I think it's just getting that freeze out, or like, oh, what if it's the wrong choice? What if it fails? Because I mean, you're always going to move forward regardless. At least you learn something new about that process.
And I'm glad you shared that because that goes right back to the doubt and insecurity, which are just more signals around you feeling those feelings and learning how to discern, which is creating that big map for yourself of like, if I was feeling something, but I'm doubting it, it's like, okay, I was feeling sadness. And what do I do about sadness? Well, now if you're willing to go into the depth of the discernment, like you're mentioning, you're learning all of the avenues of those signals together, which completes so much more of the map for you. So you have that much more level of fulfillment if you're willing to look at all of those pieces.
Yeah, cool. That literally just clicked while we were talking. So like even shows how something you had highlighted out here and then like how it applies back. So that's really cool. Okay, so a little bit more on back to the product side. Outside of the PNR, do you have like favorite VST products or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, the Clear Source spray is one of my favorites. And like every time I talk to people, a lot of people say it's their favorite. Yeah, that is such a good spray. Yeah, it's just the smell of it, the feel of it, all of it is just such a good spray. So for me, right, like when I wake up, and it's like how I use it is different day to day, but one of my favorite ways to use it is like when I wake up, I spray my bed and then I spray myself. So when I spray myself, so let's say I wake up and I'm just feeling, a lot of times when we go to bed and we wake up, we're detoxing from the night before of everything, like our body's just running through its standard process, right? If we're not up to date with our resources, like we were talking before, your body will definitely want to like detox. And that could show up as sweat. It could show up as like a film. It could show up as like tension, right? Your body's just cleaning up. So when I use the Clear Source spray on my body in the morning, I just spray it around me. I like to spray it like from the bottom. I do 3 sprays, like feet, stomach, head, and maybe my arms, maybe my back. It just depends how I feel that day. But when I spray it, I immediately feel as if there's this level of like gunk that just starts to lift up and it just dissipates into nothingness. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I'm first able to discern that there was something there that I didn't recognize mentally, right? I didn't recognize there was like a little sludge right there. So I spray it, and now the fact that I was able to feel the freedom, okay, to me, I'm so grateful because I now get to recognize or at least access a different sight, right? I get to start to see there's something energetic, like there's a density or there's like a film or like a dirt that I thought could only exist physically, but now it's energetic. Okay, how can I start to recognize it on a much more regular basis throughout my day? Right? I start to learn what that feeling feels like, so that let's say like when I'm driving in my car and I'm sweating, or like, right, I just like there might be some road rage action happening and I might feel a little stressed. It's so much easier for me to notice, oh yeah, I now see my body detox some of that gunk because I started sweating. And it's actually more around my shoulder because I was tensing up like this. So it's not just my muscles tensing, right? It's actually my field and my like cells detoxing all of these feelings and all of the stored memories. And it's just like sitting right here as a bundle, and it feels thick. So I could just grab the spray from my car, spray it right there, and suddenly I can relax more.
Awesome. I never thought about bringing it on the go. I usually use it, or even myself, like I usually use it to clear spaces. Like if I ever go to new hotels, Airbnbs or whatever, the energy kind of feels like a little dense. Just kind of like get that out and like stabilize just a new place. But I've never used it for personal energy, so that's a super cool take. Any others, or that's the main go-to?
Those are my main go-tos, because I'll be honest, when it comes to, and this isn't just with VST products, because for me, when I work with products in general, I stay away from a lot of products, but not in the sense of like I push them away, because I like to understand that those products have a lot to help me with, and me just looking at them already starts to highlight in me, because of the way I've worked with my body. It starts to highlight immediately what that product can help me with. And if I can get to the point of not needing that product at all, awesome. To me, that's my main goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it tells me, for example, when I use the clear source spray, because I would still use it, that's telling me that I still have like some things to learn about how I see energetics or how I feel them and all that jazz. So there's not many products that I get to use that if I use a product, oh my God, that like to me, like that is an incredibly helpful product. So in general, I like to approach the product dynamic as, thank you for showing me you exist. Now, how do I get to create that within myself first? And then if I want to shake your hand, I'm going to go out and shake your hand.
Mm-hmm. Have you in the past, like, have you ever used M states, experienced them in the past? Did you have a bigger journey with them and then move them aside, or?
So like I still like would use all those products. It's not products that I just don't use in general. It's just I don't use them regularly. So it's more like when we were talking about the discernment and I'm recognizing what resources my body needs. I'm like, okay, now I can see that today it's definitely light or silence or whichever one of those. So for me, when I started using M states back in the day, I would put them under my tongue. I'd leave them in there for like 45 seconds and then I'd swallow it. And I'd start to notice again, with the discernment level, I started to notice that in my stomach and my cells, some cells would just start to spark up. Like they start to spin, like I was telling you with the PNR. I was like, okay, my body's recognizing there's a different way to manage excitement and energy here. That's fantastic. My body just feels more alive. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. I just could tell my body felt more alive. To me, that is a huge success. Awesome. So then I kept going. I kept using the different kinds of M states, and I noticed some M states would start to activate my brain more. Some M states would let me breathe even deeper. Some M states will help my muscles feel way more relaxed. At the time, I wasn't as worried as to like which M states are doing what. I was just more at the point of learning it with my body. Something just changed in my body. What is this teaching me so that I can start doing this on my own? Right? Mm-hmm. What is this teaching me about breathing so that whenever I'm not using the M state and I don't feel like I can breathe as well, right? Is it about relaxing around my ribs because now there's more tension around my ribs? Or is it about like creating like more room in my shoulders and lifting my arms up and making more like room up here? Whatever physical practice I could do on my own, right? That's what was the most helpful thing for me now. So now I recognize that whenever I'm either making my water for the day and it's time to add minerals, I can tap into, it's like, okay, I recognize that I do want to drink water, right? And now I want to add, is it light? Because I want to be able to translate all the information around me more clearly. Yeah, cool, that makes sense. Is it also cloud? Because I feel like I want to be able to access information to a much greater degree. I can add all of these things, right? Because I've created this level of momentum with myself of how these specific M states affect my process on a regular basis, right? So it might have started off with, okay, I can look at the label and tell me what's helping me with, but it's actually, because right, light, if light is a translator for all this information coming in for the cells, how those cells translate that light is different for every body. For me, it might be more that my cells feel that excitement. For someone else, it might be that their cells actually feel way more relaxed. So that's the important part of the discernment. For me, right, I can tell that in this day, light would help me feel that much more uplifted level throughout the day so that I can learn how I can be more up-leveled and uplifted on a regular basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I had a bit of a similar experience too. Like last summer, I was taking grounded, and I had the source seeds in my water, and I
Mm.
was doing it for a few months, and I just felt like super like present and like flowing with energy. And then I was like, hey, this is great. Like, how do I like replicate the same thing without the need for them? And now I go back to that when I kind of need a reminder to be okay, like, it was helping me get there. Like, what was the difference that time and now? So it's kind of highlights it. But grounded too, for example, like a lot of people feel like, calm and kind of whatever. I was like rushing with energy and like feeling in the moment and just like up. So it was like complete opposite of what it was, I guess, what some people find it. And then same as, other people have used it too. So it is something that you just can kind of tune into and then see what works best.
Yep. I'll also share, I'm glad you shared that. So for example, right, I don't use products too often, but I still have them all in my house because that also adds to a clarity and like an ally and a potential like more calm state of mind that I have support if I want it or if it comes up or if there's an emergency or anything, the support is there for me, right? It's not I'm not neglecting these tools. I want them to exist and they support me so much. I'm just so open to how they can support me. It can look so different every single day.